As lockdown becomes something of an unpleasant memory, here at Burncoose Nurseries we need to stop and think about the next great challenge for our business, which is to reduce our carbon credits or carbon footprint. As you may know, the government's target is to reduce our carbon emissions by 60% by 2050. That's a hell of an undertaking, and it requires everyone to stop and think about how their business is running today and what we can do to reduce our emissions, to help control climate change, and to achieve what the government wants to achieve, which is to keep global warming down to 1.5% to 2% as against the carbon emissions and the climate as it was in 1990. That's a hell of an undertaking, and I just wanted to now talk you through a few of the things which we've done in the nursery, which were fairly obvious, to help with cutting our emissions and cutting our contribution to greenhouse gases. So the first thing we've done as a nursery is to do away with the black plastic pot. Black plastic pots are not biodegradable, they cannot be recycled, and they're now a thing of the past. Instead, we have switched to using pots of a variety of colours which are biodegradable. And you will now see on the nursery, and you'll receive your orders mainly in pots, slightly varied colours, but they may be grey or green, or as you can see here, somewhere in between. And these pots are recyclable, they are degradable in the way that black pots haven't. So in the future, your plants, when they arrive from the nursery, may look a little bit unconventional. Obviously it'll take us a year or two for everything that we grow to be grown in biodegradable pots, but we're moving forward on that front. This year's Calmere's sitting nicely in a new format of biodegradable pots. So our tunnels all look a bit different now. Here's a crop of magnolias which have just been potted on into 5 or 7 litre pots. They look a bit different. These are some of the liners which we've had in from New Zealand and other places, also all in biodegradable pots. The nursery really does look a bit different, and before long, give us a year or two and you won't see any more black plastic pots. Another thing we can do to improve our carbon footprint is to make great improvements in the packing shed so that everything we use as packing materials are fully biodegradable. And the second thing is to create the paperless office. Now that sounds pretty obvious to those of you working in much bigger businesses than Burncoose, where your hands don't get covered in peat and plants. But for us, paper has always been part of the order processing system, and the paper starts in the office and winds its way down to the packing sheds, and then the packing occurs and it goes back to the office. Today we're very nearly fully computerized, and a lot of the paper that used to plague our business and annoy you so much when you rang us up on the telephone, it's all gone now. All the information we need about an order is up on the screen instantly, and we can give you the advice you need without having any paper or without writing anything down. If you've been in this little packing shed office a year ago, you'd have seen a sea of paper. Today it's all gone. And if we move on and look in the packing shed itself, you'll see how few materials that we're using are not fully biodegradable. The biggest issue which any plant nursery has is its potting compost. Traditionally, this comes in bulk deliveries and is basically peat based. So this is peat that's dug out of the ground, probably in Finland, possibly in Ireland, and it's what we're using to pot our plants in. Now obviously that's not desirable. We're destroying peat which has been laid down over millions of years and using it in an unsustainable way. So that's a very big problem for any nursery growing ericaceous plants, and by ericaceous plants I mean rhododendrons, camellias and magnolias, which are our lifeblood. And basically they only grow in acidic soil, and peat is acidic soil, and that's why we use it. So we have actually been able to make some steps in the right direction. When you look at our compost very closely, you can see that actually not all of it is peat, and that we've now added something like 40% of other inorganic matter, which is basically bark mulch and other composts, which greatly reduces the amount of peat that's involved, but it doesn't take it away altogether. The science is moving forward, but there are plenty of plants which you could grow entirely in compost or entirely peat-free, and typically your bedding plants and some of your herbaceous plants will grow perfectly well like that. Many of our plants won't, so the science needs to move forward. More experiments need to be undertaken with coir bark and other materials which might substitute for peat, but the problem is the acidity, and the problem is also whether rhododendrons, camellias and magnolias will grow properly in it. We don't know all the answers to that yet. We may not know them for some years, but we are trying hard to reduce the peat element in our potting compost, as is any responsible nursery, but there's some way to go. Another problem is the vehicles which we use in the nursery, and this is one of our old tractors. They're burning fuel. In our nursery of the future, we would like to think that we can electrify most of the vehicles that we use. And indeed, if we look at the small machines which we use to lift your orders in the nursery, we may not be quite electric yet, but we're going that way. Our carbon footprint can be reduced by using small vehicles which use less fuel and are more maneuverable. But again, we aren't quite yet electric as we would like to be. Our forklift truck currently runs on gas. Well, that's possibly even less desirable than using petrol or diesel for transportation. So the next forklift truck we will get will be electric, and that will be another change and another positive move. So this is one of our mist propagation units. It's the height of summer and we're just about to start a new cycle. But the thing I wanted to point out to you is that today these mist benches are heated by cables which run underneath the soil, underneath this sand, and they heat the mist bench to a meridian temperature, and the automatic sprinklers come on automatically depending on how warm or otherwise it is outside. So this heating system in this propagation unit is entirely electric. In the past we used gas heated hot water to create the same effect in the mist benches, but when we realized what that was doing in terms of costs and in terms of our carbon footprint, we obviously decided to switch entirely to electric. So today, all our mist benches, all our propagation units are heated by electricity, and as we know, in Cornwall, with so many wind turbines, a great deal of that energy is being created from wind, and we're using it in the best way possible to reduce our carbon footprint. Another thing we've got to think about and concentrate on more than we ever have before is how our staff travel to work. We're in an isolated area, about 4 miles from Redruth, with some fairly hefty hills, but 1 or 2 of our staff do risk it on a bicycle. More importantly, we need to do more about people travelling to work together in the same car and thinking how we can do that. We do have a bus stop right outside the nursery, which is a great help to a number of our staff because they can reduce their carbon footprint of coming to work. And as you can see, the bus stop is literally right outside our entrance. As we discovered from lockdown, people have come more and more used to receiving their orders by mail order. Parcel deliveries have become the new norm in the times we live in, and Burncoose Nurseries is no exception. Here is just a couple of hours worth of packing up on a Monday morning for the courier to collect in, no doubt, a diesel van. It'll go to a hub, then it'll go to another hub, and then another van will collect it and drive it miles to be delivered to a doorstep. Now, what could be worse for emissions and for our carbon footprint than that happening? But that is the reality of the modern world. That is an even bigger problem. But I think it's a problem that lockdown also taught us how to understand, because we're becoming more used to collecting our parcels from a single depot, if we possibly can. So I think in the future, what we need to do is to set up a system with our couriers and with our customers whereby it becomes the norm for them to collect their own parcels locally, rather than having yet more vans whizzing around the countryside with perhaps very small packages. But that's the thing of the future. Delivering this lot is one of the great problems that we have, and we all have, in coping with our carbon footprint. So we talked about the problems in the nursery associated with our carbon emissions and our carbon footprint that we can do something about fairly easily. We then move on to the bigger issues and bigger problems, which is much more difficult to deal with. As in any nursery growing plants, water, storage for water, boreholes are absolutely crucial. And in what's been a very hot summer, we've been struggling to keep the watering systems going because it's been incredibly hot. Now, in the real world, we should be setting up a system to recycle the water from these tunnels. We should be capturing it as it runs off the plants, and all the wasted water that doesn't actually go into the plants should be being captured in some sort of a lagoon, which we can then recycle and reuse, rather than taking more water from the ground than we need to. Now, that's a very big step. It's a very expensive step. It'll require a lot of science and engineering and electrics and pumps. But we recognize that although we have a license to use the water, which we do, we recognize that in the future there will be more restrictions due to climate change put upon us, and we recognize that we've got to put together a really good system for recycling our water and reusing it. The problem is that the nursery is plumb bang on top of a hill, and actually the water runoff runs 2 ways. So we're probably going to have to need 2 recycling systems, which is a geographic and locational nightmare, but it's something we're going to have to address because we suspect before long the government is going to force us to. So there's still a great deal more we can do here in the nursery to improve our carbon footprint. But there is one important thing that we've so far not talked about, and that is the ability of trees to capture carbon. Now, the government is already providing grants to farmers and landowners who want to plant new trees and new woodland. And they're giving grants for the tree planting, but they're also giving grants for the carbon which those plantings actually capture. This is quite large-scale tree planting, and it's woodland planting, including conifers, so it's not really what the nursery does. But the concept at the moment is that over every 5 years, the owner of the trees will receive a carbon credit, which today is worth about £20. Now, you can argue that £20 isn't nearly enough for the costs of maintaining the trees, keeping the squirrels out of them, keeping the rodeo out of them, brashing them, cutting out the poor ones, and all that sort of thing. But that's in a sense irrelevant. The issue is that planting trees and planting shrubs, of course, as well, captures carbon. Now, we had a look at our statistics in the nursery, got the computer whirring, and in 2019 we sold 6,717 trees by mail order. We also sold about 42,000 shrubs, and I mean by shrub I mean large shrub as opposed to a rockery plant or a herbaceous plant. Now, if we just convert those tree numbers into perhaps an acreage, supposing we were to plant an acre of trees at, say, a 9-foot spacing between each tree, that would mean we'd actually plant about 1,300 trees per acre. That's equivalent actually to 5 acres of trees. And if we said we were planting the trees at a greater spacing, say 800 or so trees per acre, then that works out at about 8 acres of trees. So the contribution that Burncoose is making to carbon capture through the trees and shrubs which we're selling is actually quite considerable. Current estimates say that 4 trees in their lifetime are probably capable of capturing a ton of CO2 from the atmosphere. So if you take an acre of trees in the sort of spacings I've been talking about, or even planted much further apart, the reality is that 100 trees could probably sequester or capture 100 tons, or maybe even up to 200 tons of carbon over 100 years. Now, that really is something, and obviously not all trees are going to grow as large as each other, and a cherry isn't perhaps going to grow as large as this poplar here, but you get the general idea that tree planting is a huge plus in carbon capture. 40 or 50 largish shrubs or small trees planted in the same area as your trees, or perhaps 200 shrubs planted in your acre in amongst your trees. There's another 50 or 100 tons of carbon capture. Obviously the shrubs aren't going to necessarily live anything like as long as the trees. So let's say half the capacity of a tree to carbon capture. But even so, the plants which we're selling to you, if planted wisely and sensibly, are doing a lot for our carbon footprint, and they're also doing quite a bit for your carbon footprint. And that really is the point, and it works both ways. So let's just look at a mature tree standing in open parkland, as this one is, a gorgeous English oak, which was planted here probably just before 1800. It appears on the 1803 map, so it's well over 200 years old. Standing beautifully on its own. Yes, it's lost a few branches and had a few split outs, but just think how much carbon that wonderful English oak has captured in its lifetime. One large tree like that is probably capable of capturing up to a ton of carbon in any 50-year period. So that tree has captured 2 tons of carbon and made a dramatic difference to our whole environment. Imagine you planting an oak tree like that, or any tree like that, and you then can see very clearly the contribution that tree planting can make to carbon capture and the reduction in emissions. So a little bit earlier we're standing beside 4 trees in the nursery which were ready for sale, about to go out onto an order, and I'm now standing in the middle of a woodland planting. This field we're standing in 2007 was exactly that. It was growing a crop of wheat, and today we have the start of a woodland garden. And you wouldn't perhaps believe that this tree, this acer tree that I'm standing under, is only effectively 13 years old, but it is. Trees grow at different rates, and if you look at the different trees and some shrubs that are planted here in this 4-acre plot, you can begin to see how much carbon capture will be achieved in a woodland garden. Obviously not everyone will have a huge area like this to plant up with trees and taller growing shrubs of all heights and dimensions, but the reality is that whatever scale you're tree planting, you are creating the carbon capture, which is what increasingly our environment and businesses are all going to be thinking about and moving towards. And here is a perfect example as we pan around and look at these different rare trees and shrubs. We can see how customers of Burncoose Nurseries can create their own carbon gain and how the nurseries can help in that process. So we've been talking about tree planting and the carbon capture that can create. And Burncoose is doing its own bit and has got its own special project to plant up this 2-acre field, which we call Tunnel Field. And we're in the process of spraying off the brambles, and then we're going to trim it all up, ready for replanting this autumn. And we're going to replant it as a woodland garden with magnolias and specimen trees and other feature trees. Probably in this 2-acre plot, we'll put in maybe 80 to 100 trees, and we'll put in shrubs later when the trees have got established, and this will be open to the public. And what will this generate in 50 or 100 years' time in terms of carbon capture? Quite a few tons, and this is exactly what our customers of Burncoose and those of you who've got spare ground can do themselves to assist. So what I'm really trying to say is as follows: that we hope and believe that actually what we're doing as a business is removing more carbon from the atmosphere than we're actually generating as a business. Politicians and economists are increasingly talking about a personal carbon credit tax within the next 10 years. As far as businesses are concerned, I think it may well come rather sooner than that. Now, estimating exactly what a carbon emission is from this as opposed to that, understanding exactly what carbon capture means in terms of trees as opposed to shrubs or different types of trees, again, that's a very inexact science, and estimates will be firmed up. But the point is that we're all being forced to think about carbon capture and our carbon emissions if we're going to lower global warming. It's real, it's out there, and we can do things before the government thinks about imposing yet another tax on us. What we do is encourage you to plant more trees and shrubs, and the net benefit for everyone, for you, for us, and for our climate is very, very considerable. I apologise if this has been a somewhat amateur video, but I think and hope that the message which I'm trying to put across is a very important one which you will understand. Thank you.